Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host Anthony Faso. We just wrapped up our interview with Ali Boone, former aerospace engineer, author, real estate investor, coach, and founder of Hipster Investments. Anthony, what was a takeaway that you had?
Man, she dropped some good wisdom, and if I had to pick one, she mentioned many times how important your mindset is, right? And oftentimes we look at these investments, we're looking at the numbers and these pro formas. The pro formas always look good, right? Or nobody would buy them. But it's important to do some due diligence, but also be ready, be prepared. Things are not going to go out exactly as planned.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's going to be better. There's a possibility it may not be. So you need to mentally be prepared and have the right mindset, and particularly have more of a long-term view as when we're dealing with these real estate investments, particularly now. Because right now things are right now we're at the end of May of 2022, right? And I think we may be in the beginning of a recession. That's going to impact the real estate, but if you can stay focused on your goals and have that long-term view, have that right mindset, you're going to see this through. What about you, Cam?
Yeah, the takeaway that I had was I actually enjoyed hearing her story, and I thought it was funny that the first day that she walked into her corporate job that she knew that she did not want to be there, she described it as being sick to her stomach, and so I found that funny, and knowing that she wanted to kind of get out of that position as soon as she could.
When she talked about when she visualized kind of what her first day looked like, that was my first day working for PricewaterhouseCoopers. But I wasn't wearing business casual. I had the suspenders and had the suit, and I was fired up. But at least at that point. But it's kind of interesting on her view.
That is funny. And then in the meat of it, when we really got into it, man, I thought she gave us a great overview of kind of single-family rentals and the history of them over the last 15 to 20 years, and maybe some of the where they may be heading in the future. So I really enjoyed that. She gave some really good insight.
She's also a big fan of Paul Mitchell.
She did. She snuck one in there.
Enjoy the episode.
Take care.
Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast, where we teach clients how to build wealth and create passive income without the risk of Wall Street.
Ali, we are excited to have you here, and I am really excited because I love your backstory.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting. So let's start there, and then we'll kind of get into what you're currently doing. But tell our listeners a little bit about how you were able to escape the rat race, and a little bit about your story.
Sure. It was not graceful. I don't know if anybody's really is, but I grew up in the typical mindset of go to school, get good grades, get a secure job, retire when you're 65, all that nonsense. So I did that. And through grad school, I was flight instructing. So I was a pilot. That plays into the story later. And I ended up getting a master's degree in aerospace engineering, came out of the flying thing, which, hello, what more secure job could you possibly get?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I got hired for, the dream job. And the reason flying matters is because my office through grad school, my office was the sky. It was adventurous. I was flying with students. I was teaching it. It was super fun. And I was like, wow, this is great. So I finished grad school, I get this dream job, and the very first day I put on business casual clothes, which is not totally me. And, I strut in for my first big girl job, and I'll never forget, I can still picture it clear as day. I turned the corner into my new cubicle. Now, someone who had just been flying airplanes and having the sky as an office, I looked into this cubicle and it was just gray and drab, and there's this computer, and I was like, uh-oh. I knew right then. But I hadn't even sat down in the chair yet, but I could literally feel my soul just leave through my toes. And I was like, I just went through a lot of school to already hate this. And I was like, pipe down, sit down, this might work out fine. From that moment on, I was like, I gotta get out of here. So for the next 5 years, I just didn't know how to get out, because I could fly an airplane and I was kind of a pretty bad engineer, so I wasn't really good at that either. And I was like, I just don't know what a practical skill is. Like, how am I going to get out of here? So I was reading every book. Of course, everything started with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, as I feel like it did with a lot of people. And I was just getting stuff on the internet. And I was like, okay, wow, how am I going to get out of here? And at some point I had realized, I was like, okay, it seems like I'm either going to have to start a business or do something in real estate investing. That seemed to be the kind of general theme of how people got out of corporate, got out of the rat race. So I was researching everything about both of them. Long story short, for a long time, I wasn't really gaining traction because I was investigating too many things. And at one day I was like, I think I'm going to have to pick one of these. So I actually decided to start a business. I didn't know what kind of business, but I was like, I'm going to start a business. And next thing I know, a real estate investing advertisement showed up in my inbox for a totally random investment. I was like, I'll check it out. I'm bored. And I ended up liking it. And I was like, you know what? While I still have a good paycheck and health insurance every Friday, I'm going to invest my money, do something smart, because when I finally break out of this hellhole, I don't know what's really going to happen. Am I going to have money? Probably can't get a mortgage, whatever. So I'll do it now. And I ended up investing, and the people that I met through real estate investing, it was kind of like one thing led to another. I started investing for myself. I started telling everybody about it. People are like, what are you investing in? And it became, suddenly my cousin was buying properties. My mom's friend was buying properties. I started writing about it on the internet, and Bigger Pockets found me, and Bigger Pockets asked me to be a writer for them. I was like, oh, okay, this is
very cool.
odd. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I started writing for Bigger Pockets, and suddenly everybody, because I was primarily investing in and working with turnkey rental properties. And it wasn't a new concept then, but people were just starting to kind of get excited about it, find out about it. So everyone started coming to me because I was writing about them, saying, who are you buying through? How, asking all these questions. And that eventually it became such a big thing that I ended up walking out of corporate to do that full time. And that was, I actually started my company 10 years ago this year, which I just now realized, which is super cool. And so for the longest time, it's been a lot of turnkeys, helping people find turnkey providers, helping them through the buying experience, all of that kind of stuff. And then in the last few years, a lot has developed in terms of doing real estate investing coaching. I finally put my book out. So it's been kind of fun for me as I'm still doing turnkeys. I feel like I can't leave turnkeys if I try. I keep trying to leave them, and I just kind of keep staying with them. But they're so great, but they can be so frustrating too. But it's been really cool to mix in the coaching and being able to talk about things outside of turnkeys. So that's where I am. So I literally walked out of corporate. It'll be 10 years ago this coming up September, which is crazy, actually.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, good for you.
Thank you.
On being able to escape that hellhole of a cubicle.
God bless it. It was a dream job, just it wasn't my dream job.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, what was that email that you got? Was it about promoting turnkeys? What was it? Well,
so for the record, I was like, first of all, this is certainly going to be a scam, and I'm going to prove it as such, but I don't have anything better to be doing. So I'm going to go forward on that. So prior to me getting this email, I had casually gone down. I live in Los Angeles, and I went down to Orange County with a real estate agent because I was still toying with that real estate business thing. And I looked at rental properties. And at the time, I didn't know how to run numbers, but I also couldn't quite figure out how these were supposed to be profitable. The cheapest property I looked at was $270,000. Total shack. It would have required like a whole big rehab, the whole thing. And then the rental rate would have been like $1,200 for it. And I was like, I don't know exactly what I'm looking for, but I don't really something about that doesn't quite work. Yeah. And so I had just had that fresh in my head about how expensive properties around me were. So back to this email that I got, it was actually a Think Realty it was an advertisement through the Think Realty magazine. And it said, beachfront bungalows starting at $99,000 in Nicaragua. And I was like, every single line of that I want. I was like, okay, actually, wait, where's Nicaragua? So I plugged it in. I was like, cool. Third world country in Central America. Totally my thing. $99,000 with seller financing option. Golden. And beach. Hello, obviously. And then I was like, and at the time, if there was anything I could ever do to make someone turn a head, I would do it. I've always been kind of rebellious, and I'm like, yeah, this will shake people up. And so I went forward with it, just thinking like, it's obviously gonna be a scam. I'm not actually going to do this, but it turned out to be at the time really legit. There were some big players in it. And so that actually ended up being my first real estate investment ever. It was all pre-construction development, which you can probably guess how it went. I got a beachfront bungalow and a home site, and the people I met through that were also involved with turnkeys. And so that's kind of how the turnkey transition happened. And of course, when the pre-construction development in a third world country went belly up, I was like, oh, turnkeys sure are good. And this was 2011, 2012, where prices were so cheap, cash flow was astronomical, and it was like, it became an addiction. So the Nicaragua stuff kind of disappeared, and I started buying as many turnkeys as I possibly could, because I was like, this is great. Like, how my very first turnkey was this adorable 2-story freshly rehabbed house for $55,000 in a really nice part of Atlanta. And I was like, okay. So that's
like,
that's
this
where
is
the
easy.
turn thing.
Yeah.
I was like, this is great. I was like, I want all of them.
That's awesome. So you kind of went through, you got into turnkeys, and tell us, you kind of skipped over it, but you're owner and founder of Hipster Investments.
Yep.
Can you maybe tell us a little bit about Hipster and what you guys do there?
Yeah, so Hipster really came out of, I'm not a hipster, for the record. Everyone's like, oh, I'm like, no, I don't know where the name came from. It just works.
You know, that's what really attracted. That's why Cameron reached out to you, because he knew Cameron's a hipster.
Oh, see, I mean,
Yeah.
like knows like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So Hipster came out of, in all of this, because it started where I was buying turnkeys. Then people are like, wait, you're investing in real estate, not swinging hammers. What are you doing? I was like, oh, I found this thing called a turnkey. And they're like, well, I want one. So I started telling everyone about it. At the time, I didn't have a company doing that, but it ended up where people came to me eventually and said, look, if you'll get your real estate license, we can pay you referral fees for sending us people, and you're already doing that. And I was like, I mean, okay, cool side hustle. And so I started doing that, and it really became a thing of helping people find turnkey providers. And from the get-go, and kind of where Hipster's name came from, but from the get-go, my whole goal was to be like, look, I'm not going to sell you on anything. I'm just going to tell you who I've bought through, who I've liked, if I've had challenges, I'll be honest about it. Like, I wanted, because I know when I was looking for all the answers, I wanted somebody who would just tell me like it is, because it's real estate investing. Like, you don't know what's coming out of someone's mouth. Some dude in a suit behind a desk being like, you should do this. Should I? I don't know. And so I really just wanted to be just kind of this, fellow person. Like, look, I'm investing in stuff. I like it. I'll tell you about it if you want to know about it. And that was very important to me, as I wanted to stand out different from a lot of the rest of the industry, because it's intimidating. It's a convoluted industry. It's challenging because there's so much out there. There's not a lot of checks and balances. So I just wanted to be a different kind of voice out there, which is why the name of the company sounds so different. And that really has been the premise from the get-go. Is, I have people sometimes call me and they're like, hey, here's my situation, and do you think I should buy a turnkey? And I'm like, no. And they're like, well, isn't that what you sell? And I'm like, but like, you have the resources and interest to go rehab a house on your own. I would not buy a turnkey. I'd go rehab the house. That's been the stance from the get-go. Me, my employees, anyone that, we talk to anybody, that's where it comes from. So that's kind of where the identity kind of formed. Is we wanted to be something a little bit rebellious, but in a good way, and just seem different than everybody else, because I feel like, I hope that we offer something different than a lot of people do.
Would you mind, we've mentioned the term turnkey, just for Cameron's sake, would you mind defining that?
Of course, only for Cameron though.
Thank you.
It's only for Cameron.
Thank
The
you.
listeners know.
Yeah, catch me up, please.
Yeah.
So the term turnkey technically refers to the condition of a property. So if you buy a freshly rehabbed house, or a house that's in really nice rent-ready condition, there's tenants in place already paying rent, and then property managers on standby to manage the property for you, the metaphor is you can just stick the key in the door and turn it, and you're making money on day one. You could have a house right next to you that would be in turnkey condition. But most of the time when I'm talking about turnkeys, and when most people are talking about turnkeys, they're talking about properties in turnkey condition, like we just talked about, that are being purchased from turnkey providers. So these turnkey providers are companies who, they're kind of just glorified flippers who focus on investors. They're companies who go out in particular markets where there's cash flow, and they buy up a whole bunch of distress inventory. They rehab all the properties, they place tenants, they have property managers. So you as the investor can be as hands-off as possible. I used to make the mistake, and a lot of people have made the mistake of calling them hands-off rental properties. But what I found out very quickly is that people take that too seriously, and they don't do anything for their investment. I'm like, not what we meant. But as far as owning and buying real property, it's about as hands-off as you can get. There's still certain things you need to learn about it, but it's, for either brand new investors, they can be really helpful. For, I'm in California, there's no cash flow to be heard of here. So I can buy out of state because people are doing the heavy lifting for me, the rehabbing, the placing tenants, managing tenants, all that nonsense. So again, while it's not 100% hands off, it's about as close to it as it can be. And honestly, when my properties are going well, I spend 5 minutes or less a year on them, which is fantastic.
That's amazing.
Now, Ali, you had mentioned as you're talking about your backstory that you'd mentioned you've had some frustration with turnkeys. So you mind explaining, going a little deeper in that?
Yeah, and I'll caveat it with more of my frustration is just because I'm on both sides of the equation now. Like that's a different scenario from if you're just buying turnkeys. Now, Don't get me wrong. If you're just buying turnkeys, you can have plenty of frustrations, but I get double the frustration because I get to deal with both the turnkey providers and the turnkey buyers, which is basically why I drink wine at night. But the crux of it really is because my frustrations in particular is that in order for, let's say that you want to buy a turnkey rental property and you come to me and you're like, hey, Ali, help me find someone good. I want to get a good property. And I'm like, okay, well, here's the people I know, here's whatever. In order for everyone to enjoy that experience, everyone has to perform as well as possible. And guess what? We're dealing with a bunch of humans. And I have a theory, when there's humans involved, there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be errors. And one of the biggest pain points for me, and because I'm the middle person, that's where my frustration comes in, is I'm having to deal with the providers and the buyers, and they're not always seeing eye to eye. And I'm suddenly becoming the therapist for everybody, which is fun-ish, kind of. But actually, it's not. It's really not. But, one of the biggest challenges I've had with being that middleman, and I'm trying so hard, especially in today's real estate market, to change this mindset, is turnkey investors oftentimes come in expecting perfection. They're like, oh, well, this fully rehabbed property with this tenant paying this amount in rent and this pro forma is here and here's everything that's advertised. And if at any point any of that is not 100% accurate, they just freak out and they're like, what? I'm not getting a perfect thing. Like they're expecting everything to get handed to them, which that is 100% of the intention. But guess what? We're in real estate. We're dealing with humans. Like there might be a mistake on the pro forma, or maybe this property, the rehab took longer. It's not any mistakes or any errors that are uncommon. They just, if the person doesn't receive this perfect product and everything's as advertised, the most basic example being, I tell people all the time, don't trust the pro forma that a turnkey provider gives you. It's not because they're bad intentioned and they're trying to lie to you. Well, most of them, they're not trying to lie to you, but it is your job as an investor to do that due diligence and verify all of those numbers. And they're like, well, but I'm buying a turnkey. Like that should all be done for me. Well, and then to top it off, guess who they get mad at if something doesn't pan out? Me. And I'm like, well, first of all, could you be mad at them? Second, like, hang on, like, let's work this out. So it's really just my frustrations because it's so many people in the equation and not everyone always sees eye to eye. Properties aren't always exactly perfect. Pro formas aren't always exactly perfect. So most of my days are spent trying to get everyone communicating, well, playing therapist, actually. Now that I've actually thought about that, I'm like, oh, that is my job, full-time. Turnkey therapist. Hey, that might be good marketing. I should write that down.
That would be good. I was another kind of title came to my mind was matchmaker.
Well, it's funny because I used to tell people, they say, what's your role in this? What does Hipster do? And I used to tell them specifically that I was just a glorified matchmaker. I'm really just connecting buyers and sellers, which is very true. The reason I don't say it quite as much now, I still do sometimes, but what I realized is about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years into this or something, that not only, I used to think I was only the glorified matchmaker, but then I realized that I'm possibly more of everybody's emotional support dog. So it's like the matchmaking is actually not the hard part. I become the emotional support dog because with turnkeys too, it attracts a lot of brand new investors. It's, if you're about to go buy a dilapidated shack and rehab it or whatever, like I mean, a lot of newbies do that too. Maybe I don't recommend it, but it's an advanced investor type of thing. Turnkeys are so good for new investors. It attracts a lot of new investors, which God bless them, because I didn't, like when I was looking at those Orange County properties, I didn't know how to run numbers on a rental property either. So it's not that they're expected to know how to perform well as investors, but also that's how I end up becoming an emotional support dog, because they're scared. They're about to drop $30,000-$40,000 on this thing they've never seen before from strangers they've never met before. What could go wrong? So the emotional support dog or therapist thing became so big, then it kind of ended up a little bit trumping the matchmaker label, but it still is very true.
In regards to kind of that matchmaker part, is what I'm hearing is people will come to you and then you'll make suggestions on turnkey providers. What are maybe some of the criteria that you may consider when suggesting certain providers? You'll notice a theme in how jaded I am from working with turnkey providers for so long. I tell people that too. I'm like, I'm jaded. So like my responses will probably sound as such, but it's funny because in the beginning and even up until, I don't know, the last few years, like people are like, I want to vet a turnkey provider. What questions should I ask? What things should I look for? And I was always giving more technical things like, what markets do they operate in? What kind of neighborhoods do they operate in? What's the scope of work on the rehab quality, all that kind of stuff. And now my answer tends to be something more along the lines of, you know what, if they'll just freaking call you back and like guide you through a good experience and let you throw your inspector in there to confirm the rehab quality, good start. Great start. Like, which is actually probably not very helpful for people because it's like, okay, cool. But like, let me preface this too, is that 10 years ago, there were a million different turnkey providers. Turnkeys were so big because cash flow was huge. And now, back then, every mom and pop shop opened up, every Joe Blow could become a turnkey provider, and they did. And over the years, when the market got more challenging for turnkey providers, or just people had this brainiac idea, became a turnkey provider and then completely flopped. Nowadays, when you find turnkey providers, they've probably kind of stood the test of time. They're still around for a reason. So that's also a little bit of the shift, where before it really was technical because there wasn't really a company with a ton of history. It's like, okay, well, what are they offering? And all of that stuff still matters. But I feel like nowadays we're at a little bit of a different starting point where there's already some street cred there because they're still in existence, which is a really good start. So that's kind of a little bit of the shift from the more technical answer to the slightly abstract and jaded answer also. Have you seen it, or how do I ask this, is what do you anticipate with turnkey, right? And where I'm going with this is that you just mentioned a minute ago that, you go back 10 years and cash flow was pretty easy to find.
Yeah.
And now what you're seeing is you kind of see cash flow getting kind of crunched, right? Tightened, getting smaller. Where do you see that?
Makes my life so much easier.
Yeah, right. Where do you see that going?
My first reaction was nowhere good. Where I see it going is turnkeys are, I think there's two different shifts that are happening. Is number one, the shift in the actual properties themselves. 10 years ago, you could get a fully padded product, which meant everything was perfectly fully rehabbed. You don't close until tenants are in place. Property managers are there. The providers were offering like year-long scope of work warranties. There were tenant guarantees where, like, if for some reason the tenant left within 3 months or something, the provider would pay you the difference in the rent, all that kind of, I mean, there were so few ways to go wrong with a turnkey because it was fully padded back then. It was just like, it really allowed consumers, in my opinion, people who are actually consumers and not really investors, it allowed consumers to act like investors. Because for the last 10 years, it's been super easy to invest. Everything's been cheap. Interest rates are cheap. Everything was only ever going up. Great. So everyone's like, I'm going to be a real estate investor. Well, now things are changing. So you now with the turnkeys don't necessarily get quite as much well, not even quite as much. You don't even get half as much padding. Now you're lucky to get a 90-day scope of work warranty. There's no tenant guarantees. Most of the providers are selling before tenants are placed, which means you're going to have a vacancy period. it's not the fully padded product anymore, which translates into a couple different things. The turnkeys themselves are shifting a little bit. Like I said, you're probably going to get one without tenants in it. You can still get some with tenants, but it's not as common. Scope of work warranties are different, all of that. But also what a lot of the providers are doing is saying, hey, we could do a full turnkey on this thing, which means fully improve it, full rehab, all that kind of stuff. Or in some cases, if we do that, the numbers aren't going to work anymore. So what if we instead do like what we're now calling turnkey light, which is like all of the major equipment pieces, CapEx items are getting replaced, but maybe there's a living room full of like dark red carpet, but it's in perfectly good condition. It's just ugly. They're going to leave the ugly stuff in and not necessarily do the upgrades, which allows you to buy the property cheaper, and you can kind of upgrade it over time yourself, which means you get to keep the value add. So what I'm seeing with turnkey providers is there's still the regular turnkeys. Some of that's shifting a little bit, but some providers are starting to offer different types of properties where they're still essentially kind of managing everything for you, but maybe it's a value add deal or a turnkey light property, or it's an off market property, shifts in that. And then the second big shift that I'm seeing, and I'm trying to shout this from the rooftops and help people adapt this quicker, because as long as they don't, I'm very frustrated. My therapy bill goes very high, is the investor mindset. Like I said, consumers were allowed to act like investors for the last 10 years pretty easily. That's not the name of the game anymore. So now if you have a turnkey property that's going to give you $100 cash flow versus $300 or $400 that it would have given you a few years, does that mean it's a bad investment? Not necessarily. How do you adapt for that? It's like, okay, well, what does that cause? What are the things I need to adjust for? And really, it's just a matter now where you got to put your big boy pants on. Like, it's just not a consumer environment anymore. And so the mindset has to shift and the properties are shifting. Bigger scale, what's going to be the fate of turnkeys in the next 5, 10, 20 years? I don't know, with inflation and property values, because then are turnkeys always going to be associated with cash flow? Maybe not, because they may not have the option to be, and over the pandemic, when there was a big inventory shortage, a lot of it shifted into new construction as well. So that was another shift.
That's what I was going to ask you. I was going to see where kind of new builds kind of come into that play, is that, the distressed market is, maybe it's a little more competitive. And so providers are looking for new builds. How does that translate to the consumer?
Well, in a couple different ways. Well, and even the answer to this is different right now than it was even 1 year ago. So I started working with some new construction turnkeys, especially over the pandemic. Just like you said, the distress inventory got really saturated, basically ran out. And what was really cool about the new constructions is they were in much nicer neighborhoods. Like the ones I was working with were like A+ neighborhoods, great schools. When you do that, you increase your exit strategy huge. And the other advantage to buying a new construction is you go under contract at one price, and 8 months later, when the property's done, it may be worth quite a bit more than that. I know a couple situations where someone went under contract, bought the property, and they had like $70,000 in immediate equity. And it's like, hot dog. The downside to all of that, never mind, build times and costs and lumber and all that nonsense with where we are today, but also what really threw people through a loop, and this goes back to that investor mindset, is on a standard turnkey, call it a year ago, you could very easily get an 8 to 10% cash on cash return, if not a little bit higher. The new constructions at that time were somewhere in the 1 to 3% cash on cash return. And people are like, oh, no, I don't want that. And it's like, oh, okay, well, hang on. It goes back to this cash flow is king unfortunate mindset, I think, that people adopted, because there's 5 different ways a rental property makes money. Cash flow is only one of them. And so in the case of an A+ neighborhood, new builds, all that, you're increasing appreciation huge, you're increasing all sorts of other stuff, but people are so hung up on cash flow that they would say no to that when they could have had $70,000 of free equity. It's like, how many years of cash flow would that have taken to get you the $70,000? And again, it's that mindset shift. And now the challenge with new construction, aside from lumber and all those costs, have continued to go up, which increases the price of the property. But now with interest rates so much higher, those 1 to 3% cash on cashes were with 4% interest rates. Well, now we're at 6 to 7%. It's like, we're already down to 1 to 3%. what's left. And so I actually don't really know exactly how the new construction is going to now play into this either, because again, it's going to be up to the people to change their mindset of, do you want to say no to this property because it's going to get you 1% cash on cash to start with? And that's the thing, is like what you start with cash flow wise is not necessarily what you're going to end with. So it's a whole bunch of education that I think all of us that are more senior in the industry need to help people adopt, because as long as we don't teach them these things, they're just continuing to get more and more frustrated and they're not investing. And it's like, just because the game has changed does not mean it's a bad investment. And what's your money doing in the bank? So I could ramble on for hours about that, but that's kind of, the bigger answer to your question is, I don't know, but there's a lot of shifting happening because it's just not what it was 10 years ago.
Awesome. No, great insight. And I really didn't expect you to say, hey, this is what's going to happen. I was just looking for some advice.
Well, trust me, I've spent an unfortunate amount of time thinking, because I'm like, wait a minute, if I primarily work with turnkeys, what's the fate of my life and my business if there's no turnkeys left? I'm like, this matters.
Well, I will say typically you'll see kind of a progression. I don't know if progression is the right word, but maybe, I don't know, transition from single family, right? People move to multifamily. It sounds like you've kind of stayed there the entirety of your career. You made a comment earlier, it keeps pulling you back. Why have you chosen to kind of stay in this single family kind of space?
Well, and to your point, actually, I am starting to work with more multifamilies. And for a long time with the turnkeys, it was just a matter of there weren't as many multifamilies available. Like it was just kind of the single families that had the highest cash flow. And, there's advantages of single family that, there's the pros and cons for single and multi kind of work themselves out. But there's a big shift right now. Not only, depends on what you're defining as multifamily, but the 2 to 4 unit residential properties are getting more popular. But also for the first time ever, I'm starting to work with commercial classification, multifamily. So 5 units and above. Like right now I've got a 5-plex, an 18-plex, and I'm working with people more on that front. The hindrance there is that it's not so much that people aren't willing to do it, it's just whether they have the capital or not. Because now you're talking, $1.5 million for an 18-plex versus $150,000 for a single family house. So, but those shifts are happening 100%. And after that little spiel, I completely forgot what your initial question was.
That was it. Right?
Was it?
Well, yeah, it was a transition from single to multifamily. And right, what I heard you say there was that you are kind of transitioned over time, right? So
and I heard your question as a little bit of like, why do I stick around turnkeys? I've said that I keep trying to leave them because I can get so frustrated, playing that middleman. Because also too, what my frustration really comes down to is I don't want anyone to have a bad experience. And if there's some situation going on that, I only have so much power, and if I can't like immediately make everyone feel better, that's frustrating. And then at some point it's like, I've been investing for so long. Turnkey is such kind of a basic level thing. Like I'd like to graduate into it. But at the end of the day, every time I kind of look other directions, like the turnkeys always reel me back. And the reality is turnkeys are what got me my start in real estate investing. They've been what's kept me in, because my big thing going back to leaving the rat race was I was never trying to leave that job to get another job. I was trying to leave that job to go hang out on the beach. And I was very confused as to how exactly I was going to do that. Like everyone talks about passive income, but like I actually wanted to go hang out on the beach. So like, what am I going to do? So I think there's a part of me, my heart and my soul, that are always going to be attached to turnkeys. And I do love helping the newer investors, because turnkeys are a way to get into the industry. Even if you don't plan to stay with turnkeys, even if you're going to do advanced stuff, it is a really good entry. And my favorite people to talk to are the brand new investors who are overwhelmed and terrified. And they're like, oh my God, I want to do this, but eek. And the turnkeys really do kind of fit into that. So I can bash them all day long, but
near and dear to your heart. It's like CPAs, right? I can bash them all day long, but they are near and dear to us.
It's a love-hate thing.
Need them.
Exactly. Well, I was going to say is I found a lot of similarities in what we do, right? Anthony and I, right, kind of our business model we shared with you earlier before we went live. But man, we work with a lot of people that maybe you were, I forget when you were transitioning, how many years ago it was, but people that, are looking to transition and chasing that freedom. And a lot of times they don't have anybody in their life that's done it before. And so it is a very scary step. And so a lot of what we do is counseling, right? And it's like,
oh, you guys get to play therapist too.
Yeah, it's that mindset, right? It's like, hey, listen, like we can do this. And to kind of what you mentioned just a minute ago, if we go and we find one thing that we can get really good at and just replicate it and duplicate it, man, that's how we're going to find freedom. And so find something that works for us and just continue to work it. So
yeah. And that answer, that's something I tell people all the time, is like, that answer is something, it's different for everybody. Like I've never met two investors or entrepreneurs or whatever it is. I've never met two who do it exactly the same or succeed with it exactly the same. And that's why so many of the how-to guides, they can give you the foundation, but they can't answer the question for you. And it's, if I were to pick one thing that I could shout from the rooftops to try and help real estate investors or even entrepreneurs, because if you're talking about the rat race, you might be talking about entrepreneurship too, which was a big part of the journey for me over the last 10 years, less specifically than investing, is nobody in real estate investing talks about the mindset component in the words of, this is a mindset game. You can be told how to flip a house all day long. That's not the stuff that throws everybody off and causes the biggest challenges and causes people to quit or causes them to fail. It's, in my opinion, it's the mindset stuff. Like fear of failure is easily one of the biggest things that holds people back. When the obstacles come up, how do you navigate it? If you're suddenly going to get a 1% cash on cash return, that's a mindset thing in order to know how to adjust for that. Because you don't want to just be like, oh, it's only 1%. It'll be fine. Great investment. Maybe not. But again, it's all about what your mind is telling you and understanding things correctly. And I just feel like the kind of psychology side of investing is just not talked about, because everyone's like, oh, the numbers and the properties and the hammers and the contractors. That's all anybody talks about. So I love that you guys work with people on that front too. And honestly, I think there needs to be more therapists in real estate investing, because I feel like a lot more people would succeed. And the thing that I hate the most is if somebody doesn't succeed as an investor just because they didn't have the right resources or the right mindset, because there's no syllabus out there. We didn't learn this stuff in school. We don't know what we didn't know. So how do you know how to figure out what you don't know and who to trust? Like, it's challenging. And if those are the reasons that somebody doesn't make it, that actually makes me sad. And that's what I want to try and prevent from happening.
You mind if I ask a question? See, when we talked, didn't he say I was gonna be the one talking this whole time? Ali, you brought up mindset many times, and I actually wrote it down to follow up with you. But what advice would you? And then we're in a total agreement. I mean, we got to get right up here in our mind first. What advice do you give these newbie investors to help them get that mindset?
I think there's a couple, how to get the mindset. I think the mindset specifically really comes from getting educated. I can tell you that when I was in that 5-year period of trying to figure out how to get out of corporate, Rich Dad Poor Dad was obviously the first book that got me and probably everybody else going on this, but I ended up reading a whole bunch of Robert Kiyosaki books, the Rich Dad series. And this is actually more specific to entrepreneurship even than investing, but even some with the investing is, prior to me quitting my job and prior to me losing any money as both an entrepreneur and an investor, I had read all of his books, and there were so many nuggets that I pulled out of that book. Like entrepreneurship, for example, guess what? You're going to crash at some point. If you keep going with it, it's going to happen. So that kind of prepped my mindset. So when I inevitably crashed, I was like, wait, this is normal. Had I not read that or gotten education on that, I would have been like, I'm a failure. I quit. I can't do this. And it was so much of that mindset prep before I went flying off into the deep end that saved me. And so I think, finding authors or, mentors like you guys or people who have done it, the more you can learn, and this is not just for mindset, this is like, how does a rental property become successful? You'd be surprised how many people are like, do you think I should invest in this property? And I'm like, I don't know. Do you? And they're like, but they don't know what to look for. And it's like, again, it doesn't take long, but it's simple education. So from the mindset perspective, the more mindset books you can read, one of my favorite books is Jack Canfield, The Success Principles, which has nothing to do with entrepreneurship or investing, but it's mindset stuff. You can apply all of that to your life and your investing and your entrepreneurship. The E-Myth Revisited is one of my favorite business books, but what I've learned from that book, I took directly into my real estate investing, and it's all mindset stuff. It's not a technical how-to. And so education, I think, hands down, is one of the biggest ones. And as far, like, inevitably, you didn't ask this part, but I'm going to add it anyways, is when you start getting all this education, you're going to hit overwhelm. And that's what people call me all the time, saying, help, analysis paralysis. There's too much, and they don't know which way is up. And you just have to clear out the noise, and you've got to get kind of linear with it and just make things less abstract. And if you can do that in combination with building your mindset, like the most basic being, drop this nonsense about fear of failure. Like, is there such thing as failure anyways? And guess what? If you're in investing, you're going to fail. Again, my $99,000 beach bungalow in a third world country, big failure. But like, you can't let that stuff get you down. So if you can prep yourself before the failure, when it happens, you're like, oh, okay, it's just par for the course. Like, no big deal. But getting a mentor, reading books from legit authors, talking to people like you, really, this is not a solo journey. You've got to have people on your team, because if you try and do it by yourself, you're reinventing the wheel, and you're not going to have that support system when things get tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just take a second. Ali, what you just talked about, I think, is kind of some of the coaching that you provide, right? So that's what somebody can expect when they reach out to you. But what does the coaching actually look like, right? Do they fly out to LA and sit on your couch, right? Or what?
Hey, I hadn't thought about that, because most of it's been during COVID. I'm like, oh, never really thought about in person. So I'm actually in 10 years later, Hipster's very first office, which is why there's nothing in here, because I just moved in. I'm planning to have a couch, and I hadn't really thought about making it a therapy couch.
You should.
Like, hello.
Yeah.
Box of Kleenex.
Oh, I have one. My mom dropped it by.
Yeah, and exit out the back so nobody sees you.
A warming plant, all that kind of stuff. So what I kind of like to describe my coaching as, like, chances are I'm not going to give you your answer, but what I am going to do is kind of act like your driver's ed teacher, where I do have an emergency set of brake pedals. If you start zooming off into traffic or, something that seems dangerous, I can try and stop you. But otherwise, it's really just kind of me coaching you of, you could turn this way, you could turn that way. Here's things to watch out for. I have a lot of connections people wise. I can connect people. I can send you resources. Like, I had a woman yesterday that I talked to who was interested in particular kind of investment strategy, something I have nothing to do with, but I just happen to know somebody who does exactly that. So I introduced them on email last night. Like, basically whatever resources of mine that I can share with you, that's part of it. But really just, tell me your situation, what's going on. Okay, how are we going to get there? And what's really cool about that setup is, like, for instance, I don't flip properties, but I have property flippers who come to me. And what's cool about it is I don't have to know your strategy. Now, if you just said, like, teach me how to wholesale or teach me how to flip, I'm not your person. But like, one woman who calls me a lot, she's hilarious. I won't hear anything for 6 months, and all of a sudden I get a frantic text saying, you available? I'm like, sure. And she'll have some kind of bigger picture problem. I don't have to know how to flip to help her through that, but it's like, hey, okay, let's take that. How can we adjust for it? Like, okay, here's something to look out for. Well, what about this? If you were to do this and convert it into that, so it's that kind of thing. So I really am just your driver's ed teacher sitting there with you, and you are doing the driving, but you do have kind of that support system there with, most importantly, the emergency set of brake pedals. Like, let's hold off on that.
Just in case. Keep everybody in the rails, inside the rails.
Yeah. Or if you're going to do that, make sure you can answer these things about it. Like, if you want to do that, what are the things you need to do to get there?
Ali, you mentioned a couple books, and you very humbly did not actually mention your own.
It's true.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. I noticed. If somebody does want to read your book, it's entitled Not Your How-To Guide to Real Estate Investing, Life Lessons on Hacking Your Mind Before You Hack Your Wallet. What are they going to find, and where can they find it?
Yeah. So like I said, like my focus with that book was really to make it a prerequisite for the how-to guides. My theory is there's not a how-to guide in the world that's going to help you if your mindset's not right. So really what I do in the book is I first kind of break down the real estate investing industry. Where are the pain points? What are the challenges? What are the unique characteristics of this industry? Because it is a very unique industry. And I point all those out to help you kind of understand the dynamics of everything going on and help you kind of find your place in it if it's something of interest. I talk a lot about your own strengths and weaknesses. You can think you should flip a property all day long, but if you're like me and you're the least handy person on the planet, yeah, right.
Yeah,
It's
I'm not
like,
denying. Yeah,
and also too, it's like if someone had told me in the beginning, like turnkeys are going to be your thing, I'd be like, ew, why? Like, that sounds terrible. That's a slow speed. But like, really learning to find your niche, that's something I really worked with people on. And then I talk about just different concepts, basic leverage conversations, really just a lot of things to put in your head of like how you can get excited about and navigate this industry. And then I finish off the book with, I interviewed was it 5 or 6 successful investors who all do very different strategies. They all had the same questionnaire, basically to paint like a day in the life of, like, what are the skills that you have to use on a daily basis? What are your pain points on a daily basis? Like, what is, because it's like, I'm going to be a flipper. Well, what is flipping actually look like and actually require versus like wholesaling or turnkeys or whatever, really to just give you information to help be like, oh, that actually sounds terrible, or hey, I'd probably be pretty good at that. So that's kind of how I finished off the book. And as far as where to get it, it's definitely on Amazon, but I also set up a link for you guys so you can get a free digital copy of it if you're interested. So
nice.
My company's name is Hipster Investments. So if you go to hipsterinvestments.com/ I was like, let me make sure I say this right, / infinite wealth, one word, then you can get a free digital copy there. If you're like me and you need the paperback, there's a link to the Amazon link there also. And then if you're interested in coaching, there's information there, but basically one-stop shop, hipsterinvestments.com / infinite wealth, and you can get all of it.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you for the offer.
You bet.
Okay. Last question we got before we kind of wrap this up. Dealing with a lot of newbie investors, what are your thoughts on what you should do first? Should someone invest or should they buy their personal residence first?
Oh, invest. Come on. What kind of question is that? Robert Kiyosaki says. No, like, I think the times have changed a little bit with a primary home. And I was one. So a very short, quick story is when I got my first big girl job, I obviously got my first big girl paycheck. And my grandfather was always a big entrepreneur investor. And he had always told us grandkids, hey, if you want to invest, come to me, I'll help you out. So I went running to grandpa. I was like, Grandpa, I'm going to buy my first house. Do you want to help? And he was like, that's not an investment. And I was like, what? I was like, well, of course it is, Grandpa. It's the first one that everyone makes. And like, what are you talking about? I was like, obviously Grandpa has like Alzheimer's or something kicking in. I was like, no, Grandpa, like it's the first investment. He's like, that's not an investment. Totally shut me down. And I was like, huh. So I whined about it to my dad and he was like, well, it's not an investment. And I was like, I thought these two had just dropped off out of the sky or something. I was like, what is the deal? And it wasn't. And so of course on my own, then I bought my own house because it's a great investment. And it wasn't until I got into real estate where I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe Grandpa, okay, maybe he actually had some kind of point. Right. I was like, oh man. And like right now I rent where I live and I buy all investment properties. But I think the days have changed where primary homes used to be a phenomenal investment. If for no other reason, people used to actually stay in the same home for 30 plus years. Yeah. Nowadays, people are transient. They're moving all the time. You're mostly paying interest for the first 5 to 7 years. And it's not at all to say that it'll never be a good investment. Certainly, it still continues to be an investment for some people. I know a woman who has $1 million in equity in her San Francisco house. That screw cash flow at that point. Like, I'll take that. And so there are scenarios where it can work, but I don't think it's as much of a promise as it used to be. And if nothing else, get your feet wet with the investments and use that money to roll into it. Because as soon as you move into a single family house as a family with no investment part of it, you're paying out every month. And yes, you could maybe be able to capture that on the other end, especially if you're putting work into the house, but you just have to be a little more strategic about it than you would have been, 20, 30 years ago or more.
Well said. I love that perspective. Thank you.
You bet.
Awesome. Ali, where can they find you? Where can our listeners find you if they want to reach out? We're going to have the link to your book, but just give it to them one more time.
Honestly, that's the easiest place, hipsterinvestments.com/infinite wealth, because my contact information's on there, links for coaching, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, you can find me all over the internet and reach out to me any which way, but that's going to be the most direct link. And I love talking to people. Like, I encourage everyone, just even if you're just saying hi, like, it'd be cool to know that you heard me on the podcast, that you follow these guys, like, do you use Paul Mitchell hair products? I don't know. So,
Ali, yes. You did it. I didn't think you were going to do it.
I like to save the zingers for the end.
Oh, that was good. She just got it in right at the end. That was good. I didn't even see that coming.
You didn't think it was coming. But yeah, reach out, say hi, don't be shy.
Well done. Awesome, Ali. Thank you for joining us.
You made my day, Ali. Not just having some great information, but it's nice when I'm not the only one picking on Cameron. So
gotta have a little tag team every now and then.
Awesome. Thanks, Ali.
You bet.
Thanks, Ali. And go make it a fantastic day.
Take care.
You too.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode. Also, check out our website, infinitewealthconsultants.com, to find our podcast along with other additional resources.